was buttoning my navy dress when the phone rang. Edward Collins, my lawyer. After 9 at night, he said 3 words that stopped my heart. Your daughter-in-law isn't real. I grabbed my keys, drove to Daniel's house, sat in the driveway. The windows glowed warm. 2 figures moved inside, setting the table, lighting candles. Perfect. Beautiful. Completely false. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. The phone was still warm in my palm when I hung up. Edward Collins had been my lawyer for 12 years. Since Harold died, he never called after business hours. Never used that tone. Your daughter-in-law isn't real. Those words sat in my chest like stones. I stood in my bedroom. The navy dress hung loose at my shoulders. I had chosen it for dinner at Daniel's house. His wife Isabella had invited me. Homemade lasagna, she said. Family time. I walked to the mirror. 70 years looked back at me. Silver hair, steady hands, eyes that had seen too much to be easily fooled. But I had been fooled. Edward's voice echoed in my mind. No employment records, no registration at the clinic. No trace of Isabella Hartman before she met my son. I buttoned the dress with careful fingers. Each button a small act of preparation. War requires proper armor. The keys jingled as I picked them up. My purse sat by the door. Inside was my checkbook, the one I had used to pay for their wedding. $47,000. My cottage sold to make their dream come true. The drive across Salzburg took 15 minutes. Streetlights flickered on along the river. The bakery where Isabella bought me almond croissants sat dark and empty. She had smiled so sweetly that morning. Called me Mom for the first time. Family time, she had said. Like a prayer. Like a promise. I turned into Daniel's neighborhood. Clean streets. Proper houses. The kind of place where people trusted their neighbors. Where mothers believed their sons had found happiness. His house sat at the end of the street. Modern glass and white stone. Isabella had chosen the design. Daniel wanted something traditional. Something like the house he grew up in. She had other plans. I parked in the driveway. Left the engine running. The windows glowed golden. I could see them moving inside. 2 shapes in the kitchen. Passing dishes. Touching hands. It looked like love. I turned off the engine. Sat in the dark. Watched my son and his wife prepare for our dinner. They moved with easy rhythm. Her hand on his shoulder. His smile when she passed close. How long had I been watching a performance? The front door was painted deep blue. Isabella's choice. Daniel had wanted green, like his father's workshop door. The one he used to knock on as a boy. Wanting help with his models. His drawings. I had stood on many doorsteps in my life. Waiting for news. Good and bad. Birth and death. Joy and grief. This felt different. This felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Knowing the ground was about to give way. I pressed the doorbell, heard it chime inside, familiar and foreign at once. Daniel's footsteps approached. The lock turned. The door opened. My son stood there, 41 years old, tall like his father, tired in ways I had not seen before. His smile was automatic, practiced. He hugged me. His arms felt thin. When had he gotten so thin? Mom, he said. Perfect timing. Behind him stood Isabella, flowered apron tied at her waist. Hands clean and soft. Wedding ring catching the hall light. She smiled the smile that had convinced me to sell my house. The smile that had cost me everything I owned. She wiped her hands on the apron. Stepped forward. Kissed my cheek. Her perfume was expensive, sweet, the kind young women wear to make themselves memorable. "Eleanor," she said, "how lovely you look." I thanked her, followed them inside. The house smelled of tomatoes and herbs, wine and garlic bread, all the scents of family dinner. But the walls were wrong. Too clean, too empty. Daniel's things were gone. His university photos, his father's tools, the wooden clock Harold had rebuilt with his own hands. Everything that made this Daniel's home had disappeared. Isabella poured wine, asked about my new apartment, the small place I had moved to after selling the cottage. She had suggested the move, said I needed freedom, less responsibility, said I should support Daniel's new life. I sipped the wine, white and crisp, probably expensive. Everything in this house was expensive, paid for with money that used to be mine. The table was set with care. Cloth napkins, matching plates, a single candle burning in the center. It looked like a magazine photo. Perfect and false. We sat down, made small talk. Isabella served the lasagna with precise squares, each portion exactly the same. Her movements were careful, controlled. I watched her hands. No scars, no calluses. Not the hands of someone who worked with children, who lifted and stretched small bodies back to health. Daniel spoke about work, a new project downtown. His voice lacked excitement, the passion he once had for building things, creating spaces where families could grow. Isabella nodded at the right moments, asked appropriate questions, but her eyes kept moving. To the windows, the door, the phone charging on the counter. I cut another bite of lasagna, chewed slowly, tasted nothing. "Your employment at the clinic," I said. "How is the head nurse?" Isabella's fork paused, just for a second, then continued to her mouth. "Fine," she said. "Very busy. You know how it is with children." I did not know. She had never told me specifics. Never shared stories from work. Never complained about difficult cases or celebrated small victories. Real nurses told stories. The candle flickered, a small draft from somewhere. Isabella's eyes found it, tracked the flame. She excused herself, said dessert needed attention, but she did not go to the oven. She walked toward the back of the house, her phone in her hand. Daniel and I sat alone. The silence stretched between us, heavy with things we could not yet say. I heard the back door open. Close. Footsteps on gravel. Daniel stood, walked to the window. His wife's car sat in the driveway. But Isabella was gone. On the table, under the candlestick, lay a piece of paper. I picked it up. Read it twice. Life insurance beneficiary change. 2 blank lines for signatures. Dated tomorrow. My son stared at the paper. His face went white, then gray. "Call Edward," I said. "Then call the police." The candle burned lower. Wax pooled on the white tablecloth. Our family dinner sat cooling on perfect plates. Outside, the neighborhood stayed quiet, clean and safe and trusting. But trust, I had learned, was a luxury I could no longer afford. The lasagna grew cold, the wine went flat, and somewhere in the dark, a woman I had called daughter disappeared into the night, taking with her everything I thought I knew about love. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Daniel called Edward first, then the police. His voice shook when he gave our address. Mine stayed steady. 70 years teaches you how to sound calm when the world cracks open. We waited in the kitchen. The back door hung open. Cold air drifted through the house. It smelled of wet grass and distant rain. I walked through Isabella's domain one last time. Everything perfect. Everything false. The living room held no trace of Daniel's life. Gray furniture. White walls. Expensive art that meant nothing. Like a hotel room decorated by strangers. His father's wooden clock was gone. The one Harold spent months rebuilding. Daniel had loved that clock as a boy. Loved watching the pendulum swing back and forth. Where was it now? Sold? Thrown away? Erased like everything else that mattered? I opened drawers in the kitchen. Looking for what, I did not know. Evidence. Truth. Some sign of the woman who had lived here. The silverware drawer held matching sets. All new. All expensive. Daniel's grandmother's silver was nowhere to be found. The pieces I had given him when he moved out. The pieces his father had polished every Christmas. Gone. The refrigerator held expensive wine. Organic vegetables. Fresh herbs in small pots. The food of someone who cooked for performance. Not comfort. I found a folder in the junk drawer. Labeled utilities in Isabella's careful script. Inside were photocopies of bills. Bank statements. Daniel's bank statements. Numbers circled in red ink. Dates marked. Transfers tracked like a hunter tracking prey. My cottage sale was highlighted in yellow. The exact amount. The exact date. She had been watching our money from the beginning. Daniel returned from the living room. His face was gray, hollow. He held a cell phone in his palm. Not his usual phone, a smaller one. I found this under the couch cushions, he said. Hidden. He showed me the screen. Text messages to someone named Merrick. Short lines that made my blood freeze. Timeline confirmed. Assets mapped. Beneficiary form ready. Extraction tomorrow. The words sat between us like poison. Clinical. Cold. The language of a predator discussing prey. Daniel's hands trembled as he scrolled. More messages. Photos of our house. Screenshots of his pension account. Pictures of my cottage before I sold it. She had documented everything. Every dollar. Every weakness. Every way to hurt us. The front doorbell rang. Police. Finally. 2 officers stood on the blue doorstep. A young man and an older woman. The woman's eyes were sharp. Alert. She had seen this before. Detective Anna Weber, she said. This is Officer Martinez. They came inside. Sat at our ruined dinner table. Asked questions in calm voices. Professional voices. When did Isabella leave? What did she take? Had we noticed anything unusual lately? Daniel answered like a man in shock. Slow, halting, still believing this was some mistake. Some misunderstanding that could be fixed. I knew better. Detective Weber studied the hidden phone. The messages. The beneficiary form. Her expression never changed. But her pen moved faster across her notepad. She had seen this pattern before. I was certain. How long were they married? She asked. 8 months, Daniel said. Weber nodded. Made another note. Officer Martinez walked through the house. Checking windows. Looking for signs of forced entry. Finding nothing but careful planning. The detective asked about money. Joint accounts. Recent transfers. Daniel's voice grew smaller with each answer. Yes, Isabella had access to his accounts. Yes, she had encouraged the joint mortgage application. Yes, she knew about my cottage sale. She knew everything that mattered. Weber closed her notepad. Looked at both of us with something like sympathy. Your wife fits a pattern, she told Daniel. Financial predation. Usually targets recent widows or divorcees. Sometimes their adult children. Daniel stared at her. Still not understanding. She's done this before? He asked. Probably many times, Weber said. The kitchen clock ticked. Steady. Relentless. Each second carrying us further from the life Daniel thought he had built. I asked Weber what happened next. How long these investigations took. Whether we would recover anything. That depends, she said. On how much she moved. How quickly we work. How much evidence we find. She gave us cards, phone numbers, instructions about preserving evidence, not touching Isabella's belongings, not cleaning anything until forensics finished. The house was a crime scene now. Our home, our sanctuary, the place where Daniel planned to raise children, build a future, all of it contaminated by lies. After the police left, Daniel and I sat in silence. The candle had burned out. Wax hardened on the white tablecloth. He looked lost, broken, like a child whose favorite toy had revealed itself to be dangerous. I'm sorry, Mom, he said. The money you gave us. The cottage. I'm so sorry. I told him sorry was a luxury we could not afford. We needed to think clearly. Plan carefully. Protect what remained. He nodded, but his eyes stayed empty. I cleaned the kitchen while he made phone calls. Banks, credit cards, insurance companies. Each conversation another small death. Another piece of his life that needed rebuilding. The lasagna went into containers. Stored in the refrigerator like normal leftovers. As if this had been a normal dinner. A normal evening. But nothing would be normal again. I found Isabella's appointment book in a kitchen drawer. Neat handwriting. Careful planning. Lunch dates with women from the neighborhood. Coffee meetings with other wives. Building her network. Establishing her story. Creating witnesses to her perfect marriage. Every entry was calculated, deliberate, the work of a professional. Daniel finished his calls. Came to find me in the kitchen. His shoulders sagged under the weight of betrayal. Of stupidity. Of choices that could not be undone. Stay here tonight, I told him. Do not be alone with this. He agreed. We made up the guest bed together. Found clean sheets. Pillows that smelled like Isabella's expensive fabric softener. Even the bedding was part of her performance. Before we turned out the lights, Daniel asked the question I had been waiting for. How did you know, Mom? How did you see what I missed? I told him the truth. I had not known, not until Edward called, but I had felt something wrong. Something too perfect, too convenient. Love, real love, has rough edges. Imperfections, moments of doubt and difficulty. Isabella had been flawless, and that was the flaw. We said good night. I listened to Daniel's breathing through the thin walls. Uneven, troubled, the breathing of a man trying to sleep through a nightmare. Outside, the neighborhood stayed quiet. Safe, trusting, but I would never feel safe again. Never trust so easily. Isabella was gone, but her poison remained. In every perfect room, every expensive object, every carefully constructed lie, the house felt empty now. Hollow, like a stage after the performance ends. And somewhere in the darkness, she was planning her next show. Her next victim, her next family to destroy. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Morning came gray and cold. Daniel had not slept. I heard him pacing all night. We sat at his kitchen table drinking instant coffee. The good coffee maker was gone. Another small theft I had not noticed. Edward arrived at 8 sharp. He carried a briefcase and wore his serious face. The one he used for reading wills. Delivering bad news. He spread papers across the dining table. bank records, credit reports, phone logs, the evidence of Isabella's careful work. She started planning this 18 months ago, Edward Said. Long before she met Daniel. The words hung in the air like smoke. 18 months. While Daniel grieved his divorce. While I nursed Harold through his final illness. While we were vulnerable and alone. She had been hunting us. Edward showed us rental records from 3 different apartments. All under different names. All abandoned after short stays. Practice runs. The woman your son married was never real, he said. Daniel stared at the papers. His coffee grew cold in his hands. I asked Edward about recovery. What could be salvaged? What was lost forever? Some accounts were frozen, he said. Others emptied within hours of her disappearance. Professional work. Planned to the minute. My cottage money was gone. $47,000. Vanished into offshore accounts and shell companies. But there was hope. Edward had worked fraud cases before. Knew the patterns. The mistakes criminals make when they get greedy. Isabella had gotten greedy. The doorbell rang. Detective Weber returned with a partner. A man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as Detective Hoffman. Financial Crimes Unit. He carried files thick as phone books. Photos of other victims. Other families destroyed by the same careful hands. Hoffman spread the photos on Daniel's table. Wedding pictures from different cities. Different years. The same woman wearing different names like costumes. Isabella Hartman. Maria Collar. Sophie Brennan. Anna Fisher. My own name. She had used my own name. Each photo showed a happy couple. Smiling bride. Relieved groom. Usually middle-aged. Usually recently divorced or widowed. Usually with adult children who had money. The targeting was precise. Surgical. Your case is different, Hoffman told us. She stayed longer than usual. Took bigger risks. That means more evidence. He explained her pattern. Fast courtship. Quick marriage. Immediate access to accounts. Then escalation toward insurance claims. Life insurance, he said. The final prize. The reason for the beneficiary form we found. Daniel's face went white. He asked what that meant. How close he had come. Hoffman's answer was clinical. Detached. The voice of someone who had seen this ending before. Accidents happen, he said. Kitchen fires. Stairway falls. Carbon monoxide leaks. Always after the paperwork is signed. The room went silent. Even the coffee maker stopped gurgling. Daniel would have been dead within weeks. I was certain. And Isabella would have played the grieving widow perfectly. Collecting sympathy along with insurance money. Weber asked about other family members. Friends who might have noticed strange behavior. Red flags we missed. There were none. Isabella had isolated us expertly. Suggested I move closer for family time. Encouraged Daniel to focus on his new marriage instead of old friends. She had cut us off from anyone who might have asked hard questions. Hoffman collected statements from both of us. Every detail, every conversation, every moment that felt wrong in hindsight. The process took hours. My throat grew dry from talking. Daniel's voice cracked with exhaustion. But each detail was a weapon. Evidence in the case building against her. After the detectives left, Edward stayed. We discussed legal strategy, asset protection, ways to prevent this from happening again. I asked about other victims. Whether they had recovered anything. Whether justice was possible. Some yes, Edward Said. Some no. It depends on timing, on luck, on how much evidence we can gather. He left instructions. numbers to call, forms to file, the machinery of justice grinding slowly forward. Daniel and I were alone again, sitting in his contaminated house, surrounded by the debris of his shattered life. I told him he should come stay with me. Leave this place. Start fresh somewhere clean. He refused. Said he needed to face what he had done. Live with his mistakes. I understood. But I worried. About his safety. His sanity. His ability to rebuild from nothing. That afternoon I drove to my apartment. The small place I had moved to after selling the cottage. It felt like sanctuary after Daniel's hollow house. I made tea, sat by the window, watched normal people living normal lives. An elderly man walked his dog. A young mother pushed a stroller. Children played in the courtyard below, all of them trusting that their world was solid, reliable, safe. I envied them. My phone rang. Daniel's number. She called me, he said. Isabella. From a blocked number. My tea grew cold in my hands. I asked what she said. How she sounded. Scared, he said. Like she was in trouble. She wants to meet. Explain everything. Make things right. The words were poison. Sweet poison designed to draw him back in. I told Daniel no, absolutely not. She was still hunting, still working her angles. But I heard doubt in his voice. The part of him that still wanted to believe. Still hoped this was all some terrible mistake. Love makes fools of us all. Even when that love is built on lies. I told Daniel I would call Edward. Report the contact. Let the police handle any meeting. He agreed. But I heard reluctance in his silence. After we hung up, I sat in my chair. Thinking. Planning. Preparing for the next move in this deadly game. Isabella was not finished with us. The phone call proved that. She still needed something. Still had plans that required our cooperation. Or our destruction. I made a list of everyone I could trust. Edward. Detective Weber. My neighbor Mrs. Henderson who watched over the building. My doctor who had known me for 20 years. A small circle, but solid. Uncompromised by Isabella's poison. The sun set behind gray clouds. Streetlights flickered on. The normal rhythm of evening in a safe neighborhood. But safety was an illusion. I knew that now. Evil wore familiar faces. Lived in pretty houses. Smiled while it planned your funeral. I locked my door. Drew the curtains. Made sure my phone was charged. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. New lies. New attempts to manipulate and destroy. But I was ready. 70 years of living had taught me hard lessons. How to recognize predators. How to fight back. How to protect the people I loved. Isabella had made one crucial mistake. She had underestimated a mother's fury. And that mistake would cost her everything. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Detective Weber called at 7 the next morning. Isabella had made contact again. This time through a friend of a friend. A web of connections designed to seem innocent. She wanted to meet. Somewhere public. Somewhere safe. She claimed she had information that would help us understand. More lies wrapped in concern. More poison disguised as medicine. But Weber saw an opportunity. A chance to draw Isabella into the open. Set a controlled trap. Use her own manipulation against her. I volunteered immediately. Daniel protested. Said it was too dangerous. That I had suffered enough. That this was police business now. He was wrong. This was mother business. Family business. The kind of protection that had nothing to do with badges or procedures. Weber explained the plan. Simple. Direct. I would meet Isabella at a riverside cafe. Glass windows on 3 sides. Multiple exits. Clear sight lines for surveillance. I would wear a wire. Record everything. Give Isabella enough rope to hang herself with her own words. The cafe was 20 minutes from my apartment. I had eaten there with Harold years ago. Celebrating our anniversary. Watching boats drift past on the brown water. Now it would be a battlefield. I dressed carefully. Navy cardigan. Comfortable shoes. Nothing that screamed police operation. Just an elderly woman meeting her former daughter-in-law for coffee. The wire was smaller than I expected. Hidden under my sweater like a secret heartbeat. Recording every word, every breath, every lie Isabella would tell. Weber positioned her team early. Customers who lingered over newspapers. A jogger who stretched on the river path. A maintenance worker who cleaned tables too slowly. All of them watching, waiting, ready. I arrived 15 minutes early. Ordered tea with honey. Sat by the window facing the door. My hands stayed steady. My breathing remained calm. 70 years had prepared me for this moment. All the small battles, the tiny victories, the daily courage required just to survive. Isabella appeared at exactly 2 o'clock. Different hair color, darker, shorter, new clothes that looked expensive but not flashy. The costume of a woman seeking forgiveness. She paused at the entrance. Scanned the room, her predator instincts alert even in distress. But she saw only what she expected. An old woman sitting alone. Vulnerable, manipulable. Ready to be convinced that love could conquer suspicion. She approached my table with careful steps. Eyes down, shoulders slumped. The posture of defeat, of shame, of someone who had made terrible mistakes but could still be saved. Performance art, nothing more. She sat across from me, reached for my hands. Her fingers were cold, steady. The hands of someone completely in control. Frau Fischer, she said. Eleanor, thank you for coming. Her voice was softer now. Wounded. The voice of a victim rather than a predator. I asked why she had run. Why she had lied. What she wanted from us now. She spun a story. Rehearsed. Polished. About an abusive ex-husband. Threats against her safety. False names used for protection. Money hidden to escape violence. Daniel was never supposed to get hurt, she said. Neither were you. I love your family. I love the life we built together. Each word was calculated, designed to find the crack in my armor. The weakness that would let her back in. But my armor had no cracks. Not anymore. I asked about the beneficiary form. The life insurance change. The messages to Merrick about extraction and timing. Her story shifted, adapted. The ex-husband had forced her to plan an escape. The insurance was protection. The messages were code for safety protocols. Lies built on lies. A house of cards that would collapse with one strong breath. I let her talk. Let her weave her web of deception while the wire recorded every thread. Every knot. Every place where the story tangled with itself. She asked if Daniel would forgive her. If there was a way back. A chance to repair what had been broken. Her eyes stayed dry. No tears for her performance. Just calculated emotion. Measured vulnerability. I told her Daniel was destroyed. That the betrayal had broken something essential in him. That trust, once shattered, could never be fully repaired. She nodded, made sympathetic sounds, but I saw relief flicker across her face. Relief that her work had been so thorough. A predator celebrating her kill. I asked about the money. My cottage savings. The transfers to accounts overseas. When would that be returned? Her mask slipped for just a moment. Annoyance. Impatience. The real Isabella showing through. The money was safe, she said. Protected from the ex-husband. It could be recovered once the danger passed. More lies. But these came harder. Required more effort to maintain. I pressed further. Asked for account numbers. Contact information. Proof that the money existed anywhere but in her pocket. She became evasive. Said the details were complicated. That her lawyer handled such things. That time was needed to arrange proper transfers. The wire captured every evasion. Every hesitation. Every moment where truth tried to break through her careful fiction. A jogger passed the window. Stretched against a tree. One of Weber's team maintaining position. Isabella's eyes tracked the movement. Professional awareness bleeding through her victim act. She knew. Not the details. Not the specific plan. But she sensed the trap closing around her. Time to end this. I told Isabella the first believed her. That I wanted to help. That family forgiveness was possible if she proved her sincerity. Her relief was visible. Genuine. The first real emotion she had shown. I suggested she meet with Daniel. Face to face. Clear the air completely. Rebuild trust through honest conversation. She agreed immediately. Too quickly. Too eagerly. The hook was set. We arranged the meeting for tomorrow evening. Daniel's house. 7 o'clock. Just the three of us. A chance for healing. For truth. For new beginnings. She squeezed my hands. Called me mother again. The word that had once filled me with joy. That now tasted like poison on her lips. She left first. Walked quickly toward the river path. Shoulders straight now. The victim act abandoned the moment she thought herself safe. I finished my tea. Paid the check. Nodded to the maintenance worker who was still cleaning tables. Outside, Weber materialized beside me. Professional satisfaction written across her face. We have enough, she said. The recording. The admissions. The obvious deception. Enough to make arrests. File charges. Begin real justice. I walked back to my apartment in the autumn air. Leaves falling like confetti. Children playing in the park. Normal life continuing around the edges of our private war. Tonight Isabella would plan her return. Her final manipulation. Her ultimate victory over the family stupid enough to trust her. But tomorrow would bring surprises. Not the reconciliation she expected. Not the vulnerable victims she had learned to exploit. Tomorrow would bring handcuffs. Justice. The end of her hunting season. I made soup for dinner. Simple vegetable broth. The kind Harold used to love on cold days. The wire sat on my kitchen counter. Small. Silent. Full of Isabella's lies. Evidence of evil wearing a human face. But also proof that evil could be caught. Stopped. Punished. Tomorrow could not come soon enough. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. 7 o'clock came with October rain. Gray sky pressing down like a lid. Perfect weather for endings. I arrived at Daniel's house 30 minutes early. Weber's team was already in position. Unmarked cars. Hidden microphones. Officers dressed like neighbors walking dogs. Daniel looked hollow. Thin. Like a man who had not eaten in days. He moved through his contaminated house like a ghost haunting his own life. The dining table was cleared. No candles this time. No performance of family dinner. Just empty space waiting for truth to fill it. Weber checked the recording equipment one final time. Cameras in the living room. Audio throughout the house. Every angle covered. Every word preserved. This would be Isabella's last performance. Her final bow before the curtain fell. I sat in Harold's old chair. The one piece of furniture Daniel had saved from our family home. It smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and newspapers. Comfort from a simpler time. Daniel paced the kitchen, checked the locks, adjusted window blinds. His nervous energy filled the house like static electricity. Weber positioned herself in the study. Door cracked. Perfect view of the dining room. Her hand resting on her service weapon. The rain drummed harder against the windows. Nature providing percussion for our final act. At exactly 7 o'clock, Isabella knocked. 3 soft taps. The sound of someone seeking shelter. Forgiveness. A second chance. Daniel opened the door. She stood in the porch light wearing a cream-colored coat. Dark umbrella dripping. Hair still the new color from yesterday. The costume of repentance. She stepped inside, shook rain from her coat. Looked around the house like someone returning home after a long journey. But her eyes were calculating. Professional. Cataloging exits. Assessing threats. The predator never fully hidden. She embraced Daniel, held him longer than necessary. Her hands pressed against his back. Feeling for weapons, wires, evidence of deception. Finding nothing, she relaxed slightly. She turned to me with arms extended. "Mother," she said. The word dripped with false honey. I stood, accepted her embrace, felt the tremor in her hands. Fear, or excitement, or both. We sat in the living room. The 3 of us arranged like actors on a stage. Isabella on the sofa, Daniel and I in chairs. Distance carefully maintained. She began immediately. The same story from yesterday but refined. Polished. Adjusted based on our reactions. The abusive ex-husband. The hidden money. The protective deception. But tonight she added details. Names. Dates. Specific threats. The lies becoming more elaborate. More dangerous. Daniel listened with desperate hope. Still wanting to believe. Still needing this to be some terrible misunderstanding that love could heal. I watched Isabella's hands. They moved as she talked. Gestures calculated for maximum effect. Palms open to show sincerity. Fingers touching her heart to demonstrate pain. Street theater. Nothing more. She asked Daniel about forgiveness. About second chances. About the possibility of rebuilding what they had lost. Her voice cracked at exactly the right moments. Tears threatened but never quite fell. Emotion measured and dispensed like medicine. I interrupted her performance. Asked about practical matters. The money. The accounts. The timeline for returning what she had taken. Her story shifted again. Adaptation in real time. The money was tied up in legal proceedings. Her lawyer was negotiating with authorities. Everything would be resolved within weeks. More lies. But these came harder now. Required more effort to maintain consistency. Daniel asked about the beneficiary form. The insurance policy. Why she had prepared papers without discussing them first. Isabella's mask flickered. Just for a moment. Annoyance breaking through the victim act. It was protection, she said. In case something happened to her. In case the ex-husband found her. Daniel would be provided for. Taken care of. The words were poison disguised as care. Manipulation wrapped in concern. I asked why she had run that night. Why she had disappeared without explanation. What had triggered such desperate flight? She claimed panic, fear, confusion, the overwhelming pressure of keeping so many secrets for so many months. But her breathing stayed steady. Her pulse visible in her throat remained calm. No physical signs of the emotional turmoil she described. Professional composure. The stillness of a practiced liar. Daniel leaned forward, reached for her hands, his need to believe overriding obvious deception. "Can we try again?" he asked. "Start over? Build something real this time?" Isabella's smile was perfect. Warm. Loving. The expression of a woman who had found salvation in forgiveness. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, we can try." The rain stopped. Sudden silence outside, even nature holding its breath for what came next. I stood, walked to the window, looked out at the wet street. Normal houses, normal lives, normal families who trusted each other completely. Isabella rose behind me, approached with soft steps, put her hand on my shoulder. "Thank you," she said, "for believing in us. For giving us this chance." Her touch was warm, steady, the hand of someone completely confident in victory. I turned to face her, looked into eyes that showed no remorse, no shame, no recognition of the pain she had caused. Only satisfaction, the pleasure of a hunter who had cornered wounded prey. "You're welcome," I said. Detective Weber stepped from the study. Her badge visible, her weapon holstered but accessible. "Claudia Reinhardt," she said. "You are under arrest." Isabella's mask shattered. The victim act vanished. Her face went cold, empty. The true predator finally revealed. She did not run, did not scream, did not beg for mercy. Professional to the end. Weber recited the charges while Isabella stared at me. Not with anger, not with hatred, with something like respect. "You planned this," Isabella said. "The meeting, the recording, all of it." I nodded, told her she had underestimated an old woman's capacity for justice. She laughed, sharp, brittle, the sound of something breaking. As Weber led her toward the door, Isabella looked back at Daniel. At the house she had contaminated. At the life she had tried to steal. "You won't recover the money," she said. "Any of it. It's gone. Scattered. Lost forever." Weber guided her outside, into the rain that had started again, toward the police car waiting at the curb. Daniel collapsed into his chair, the weight of deception finally lifting from his shoulders. I made tea, strong and sweet, the kind my mother used to brew during family crises. Outside, red and blue lights flashed against the wet pavement. Official business. Justice grinding forward. The machinery of law enforcement processing another predator. Daniel sipped his tea in silence. Processing betrayal. Loss. The death of dreams he had built on lies. But also relief. The terrible uncertainty finally ended. Truth, however painful, replacing deception. The house felt different now. Cleaner. Like a fever had finally broken. Isabella was gone. Really gone this time. Locked away where she could not hurt anyone else. At least for tonight. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. The weeks that followed moved like slow water. Paperwork. Court hearings. The grinding machinery of justice processing our nightmare into legal language. Detective Hoffman called regularly with updates. Isabella had been charged in 3 countries. 16 victims identified so far. More coming forward each day. The pattern was always the same. Fast courtship. Quick marriage. Careful theft. Then disappearance before anyone noticed the bleeding. But our case was different. We had fought back, gathered evidence, set traps, made her careless with greed and overconfidence. That made us valuable. Witnesses who could testify, victims who had preserved proof. The foundation for a case that might actually stick. Hoffman explained the complexities, jurisdictions, extradition, international banking laws that made money disappear like smoke in wind. Some funds might be recovered. Frozen accounts in Germany. Property seized in Prague. But most of our savings were gone forever. Dissolved into shell companies and offshore accounts. The cottage money I had given Daniel for his wedding, $47,000, vanished as if it had never existed. But we were alive, both of us. That was worth more than money. Daniel began the slow work of rebuilding. He changed every lock, every password, every piece of his financial life that Isabella had touched. He sold the house, could not bear to live surrounded by her performance. Her careful staging, the rooms where she had planned his destruction. The new apartment was smaller, simpler, no gray furniture or expensive art. Just Daniel's things, his father's clock, his university drawings, the pieces of himself that Isabella had tried to erase. I helped him pack. We found strange things hidden throughout the house. Duplicate keys to my apartment. Copies of our medical records. Photos of us taken from a distance. Evidence of surveillance, of planning, of a predator studying her prey with scientific precision. We burned the photos in Daniel's fireplace. Watched our faces curl and blacken in the flames. Smoke carrying away the last traces of her invasion. Edward handled the legal maze. Forms and affidavits. Victim impact statements. The endless paperwork that transforms human suffering into court documents. He worked without charging fees. Said it was personal now. Said some cases mattered more than money. I wrote my statement at the kitchen table. The same table where Harold used to pay bills. Where I had taught Daniel to write his name. Where normal life had happened before Isabella arrived. The words came slowly. How do you describe betrayal to strangers? How do you explain the theft of trust? The murder of faith in human goodness? I kept it simple, factual. Let the numbers speak. 47,000 lost. 8 months of lies. A family nearly destroyed by professional deception. But also recovery, resistance, the discovery that old women could fight back. That predators could be caught. That justice was possible if you refused to remain silent. The court date was set for spring. Months away. Time for lawyers to prepare arguments. For Isabella to sit in jail contemplating the consequences of underestimating her victims. Winter settled over Salzburg like a familiar blanket. Snow on the river path. Ice on the windows. The clean cold that makes everything look fresh and new. Daniel visited twice a week. We drank tea and talked about ordinary things. Work projects. Neighborhood news. The small details that fill a normal life. Neither of us mentioned Isabella. Her name was poison now. Better left unspoken. But sometimes I caught Daniel staring at nothing. Processing memories. Separating real moments from manufactured ones. Learning which feelings had been genuine and which had been performed for his benefit. Healing was not a straight line. Some days were good, some were terrible, some were simply empty, but each day was his own again. Free from manipulation, from careful control, from the suffocating performance of false love. I rearranged my small apartment, added Harold's reading chair, bought a proper tea service, made space for Daniel's visits, created a refuge from the chaos outside. The insurance company called frequently, suspicious about the beneficiary change attempt, eager to understand how close Isabella had come to success. Very close, I told them. Weeks, maybe days. If Edward had not called that night, if we had not acted quickly, Daniel would have been another statistic. Another accidental death. Another grieving widow collecting insurance money. They upgraded their fraud detection systems. Added new screening procedures. Small victories in the war against predators. But Isabella had been smart. Professional. She would have found other ways. Other weaknesses. Other families to destroy. Letters arrived from other victims. People who had read about the case in newspapers. Who recognized the pattern, the methods, the specific cruelties. "Thank you for fighting," they wrote. For not staying silent. For proving these crimes could be prosecuted. Each letter was a small vindication. Proof that our pain had meaning. That justice served helped others heal. Spring came early that year. Flowers blooming in window boxes. Children playing in courtyards. Life returning to the world after winter's pause. Detective Weber called with news. The trial date was confirmed. Isabella had refused plea bargains. Insisted on fighting every charge. Confident in her ability to manipulate even judges and juries. She would represent herself. No lawyer. No advisors. Just her own conviction that charm and lies could overcome evidence and truth. Dangerous confidence. But also arrogance. The same pride that had made her stay too long with Daniel. Take too many risks. Get caught by an old woman's suspicion. I bought a new dress for court. Navy blue. Simple. Appropriate for testifying against the woman who had tried to destroy my family. The same color I had worn that first night. When Edward called. When the world changed. When I learned that evil could wear a familiar face. Full circle. The morning before the trial, Daniel and I walked along the river. Same path where Isabella used to jog. Where she had planned her crimes while pretending to exercise. Now it was just a path again. Trees and water and ordinary people living ordinary lives. We stopped at a cafe. Not the one where I had met Isabella for the last time. A different place. Clean of associations. Free from poisonous memories. Daniel ordered coffee. I chose tea. We sat in comfortable silence. Watching the world continue around us. Tomorrow would bring testimony. Cross-examination. The formal presentation of evidence we had lived through. But tonight was ours. A quiet evening. A simple meal. The peace that comes after surviving something terrible. Isabella had taken our money. Our trust. Our faith in love and marriage. But she had not taken our lives. Our family. Our ability to find joy in small moments. That was victory enough. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. The courthouse smelled of old wood and fresh fear. Marble floors echoed with the footsteps of people seeking justice. Or avoiding it. I arrived early. Wore my navy dress. Carried Harold's prayer book for courage. Not that I was religious. But some objects hold power beyond their purpose. Daniel sat beside me on the hard wooden bench. His hands were steady now. Calmer than I had seen him in months. The healing was working. Slow. Incomplete. But real. Edward organized our papers with lawyer precision. Victim statements. Financial records. The careful documentation of Isabella's systematic theft. Detective Weber nodded from across the aisle. Hoffman checked his notes one final time. The team that had brought Isabella down now prepared to finish the job. Other victims filled the gallery. Faces I recognized from photographs. Stories I knew from police reports. A small army of people she had tried to destroy. But we had all survived. All fought back. All refused to disappear quietly into her collection of casualties. The bailiff called for order. Everyone rose as the judge entered. An elderly woman with sharp eyes and no patience for performance. Perfect. Isabella was led in wearing orange jail clothes. No expensive suits now. No carefully chosen jewelry. The costume of the convicted. She looked smaller somehow. Diminished. The aura of control and confidence stripped away by months in custody. But her eyes remained alert. Calculating. Still searching for advantages. Still believing she could manipulate her way to freedom. The prosecutor was young, earnest, armed with boxes of evidence and righteous anger. She laid out Isabella's crimes with mathematical precision. 16 victims, 8 years of theft, over $2 million stolen through systematic fraud and identity theft. The numbers were staggering, abstract, until you remembered that each figure represented a family destroyed. A life savings vanished. Trust murdered by professional deception. When my turn came to testify, I walked to the witness stand on steady legs. 70 years of living had prepared me for this moment. I told our story simply. The quick courtship. The wedding I helped pay for. The cottage I sold to support their dream. Isabella's careful isolation of Daniel. Her control over finances. Her manipulation of our family bonds. The night she disappeared. The beneficiary form. The messages about extraction and timing. The prosecutor asked about emotional impact. How the betrayal felt. What it cost beyond money. I looked directly at Isabella. Made sure she heard every word. She had stolen more than savings. She had poisoned the idea of love itself. Made trust dangerous. Turned family bonds into weapons that could be used against us. But she had also revealed our strength. Our ability to fight back. Our refusal to be victims forever. Isabella cross-examined me herself. Tried to suggest I was confused. Mistaken. A bitter old woman seeking revenge for imaginary wrongs. Her questions were sharp. Professional. But they lacked the charm that had once made her dangerous. Months in jail had corroded her power. Stripped away the polish that made people want to believe her lies. I answered each question calmly. Factually. Let the evidence speak louder than her manipulation. Daniel testified next. Described their relationship from his perspective. The isolation. The control. The gradual erosion of his independence. Isabella tried to paint him as unstable. Paranoid. A man who had invented conspiracies to explain his own failures. But Daniel was stronger now. Clearer. The fog of her influence finally lifted from his mind. His testimony was devastating, not because it was emotional, but because it was true. Other victims took the stand throughout the morning. Each story similar. Each betrayal following the same careful pattern. The prosecutor built her case brick by brick, creating a wall of evidence that even Isabella's silver tongue could not breach. During lunch recess, I sat in the courthouse cafeteria, ate a sandwich that tasted like cardboard, watched Isabella's other victims compare notes and offer comfort. A community built from shared trauma. Survivors helping each other heal. Detective Weber joined me at the small table. Said the testimony was going well. That conviction seemed certain on multiple charges. But she warned about sentencing. White-collar crime. First offense officially. Good behavior in custody. The factors that might reduce punishment. Justice, she reminded me, was not the same as revenge. Sometimes you had to settle for what the law allowed. I understood. Had never expected perfect justice. Only accountability. recognition that crimes had been committed, that victims deserved to be heard. The afternoon brought closing arguments. The prosecutor summarized months of investigation, the careful documentation of systematic fraud. Isabella spoke for herself. One final performance. She claimed misunderstanding, miscommunication, the tragic consequences of trying to escape an abusive relationship. But her audience was different now. Judge and jury who had heard testimony, seen evidence, understood the pattern of her predation. The charm that once made her irresistible now seemed hollow, calculated, the desperate act of someone who had finally run out of victims to fool. Deliberation took 2 hours, long enough to review evidence, short enough to suggest certainty. Guilty on all counts: fraud, identity theft, conspiracy. The criminal justice system finally catching up with her careful crimes. Isabella showed no emotion when the verdict was read, sat straight in her chair, maintained the dignity of someone who believed she had simply been unlucky. Sentencing was scheduled for the following month. Time for impact statements, for the judge to consider appropriate punishment, for justice to find its proper measure. Outside the courthouse, spring sunshine felt like benediction. Warm air carrying the scent of new flowers. Life continuing after justice had been served. Daniel and I walked to the river. Same path we had traveled the night before. But different now, lighter somehow. The legal phase was ending. Appeals would come, delays and complications. But the essential work was finished. Isabella had been exposed, convicted, removed from society where she could not hurt anyone else. At least for a while. We stopped at our cafe, ordered the same drinks as yesterday, sat in the same chairs. But everything had changed. The weight of testimony was gone. The burden of proof lifted. The terrible responsibility of speaking truth to power finally complete. Daniel looked younger, relaxed, like a man who had been holding his breath for months and could finally exhale. The trial was over. Justice had been served. Our family had survived, not unscathed, not unchanged, but alive and together and stronger than Isabella had ever imagined possible. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, practical matters, the long work of rebuilding normal life. But tonight we could rest, could celebrate small victories, could remember that sometimes the good people win, even against predators who wear familiar faces, even when the cost of victory is higher than anyone should have to pay. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. 6 months later, I sat on my balcony watching autumn return to Salzburg. Golden leaves drifting past my window. Children walking to school with heavy backpacks. Life moving forward in its eternal rhythm. The letter from Detective Hoffman lay open on my small table. Isabella had been sentenced to 12 years. Federal prison. No possibility of parole for 8 years minimum. Not enough. Never enough. But something. Other countries were filing charges now. Germany, Czech Republic, Switzerland. Each jurisdiction adding years to her sentence. Each victim finally getting their day in court. The money remained mostly gone. Some assets recovered. Frozen accounts released. But the cottage savings I had given Daniel disappeared forever into the maze of international banking. We had received $17,000 in restitution. A fraction of what was stolen. But enough to matter. Enough to help Daniel rebuild his life. He used it for the security deposit on his new apartment. Furniture that was actually his choice. A fresh start in a place untouched by Isabella's poison. I kept none of it. Told him it was his now. His future. His chance to build something real. The apartment was small but bright. Windows facing east for morning light. A tiny kitchen where he could cook simple meals. A balcony barely large enough for one chair. But it was clean, honest, free from the performance of perfection that had nearly destroyed him. Daniel visited every Sunday now. We had established a routine. Tea at 3. Simple conversation. The comfortable silence of family who had survived something terrible together. He looked healthier, stronger. The hollow look was gone. Replaced by something quieter but more solid. The peace that comes from knowing yourself again. Work was going well. He had designed a community center for elderly residents. Safety features built into every room. Wide doorways. Gentle lighting. Spaces where people could age with dignity. Isabella had taught him about vulnerability. About the predators who target the old and isolated. Now he used that knowledge to build protection into stone and steel. Good coming from evil. Light growing in places where darkness had ruled. Edward stopped charging legal fees months ago. Said some cases mattered more than billing hours. That justice was its own payment. He had become a friend. Not just a lawyer. Someone who understood the weight of what we had endured. The cost of fighting back against systematic evil. We met monthly for lunch. Discussed the ongoing cases. The other victims Isabella had left scattered across Europe. The slow work of justice grinding forward in multiple countries. Each conviction was a small victory. Each sentence another year that she could not hurt anyone else. Each victim who testified was proof that predators could be stopped. The letters still came. From other families. Other survivors. People who had read about our case and found courage to report their own betrayals. "Thank you for fighting," they wrote. "For showing us it was possible. For proving that silence was not the only option." Each letter reminded me that our pain had purpose. That speaking truth to power helped others find their voices. That one old woman's refusal to be quiet had created ripples across an ocean of suffering. Mrs. Henderson from downstairs brought me soup when I caught flu in October. Sat with me while I recovered. Talked about her late husband. Her grown children who lived too far away. The ordinary loneliness of aging. But also the unexpected kindness that appears when you least expect it. Community built from shared humanity rather than shared trauma. I told her about Isabella. About the betrayal. About learning to trust again after professional deception. She listened without judgment. Without offering easy answers. Sometimes healing happens in small moments. Over shared soup. In conversations with neighbors who understand that life is hard but not hopeless. Daniel brought pictures from his new project. The community center was taking shape. Clean lines. Natural materials. Spaces designed for people who needed safety more than beauty. He talked about the residents he had met. Their stories of loss and resilience. Their gratitude for spaces built with their needs in mind. Isabella had tried to erase his empathy. Replace it with isolation and control. But empathy was stronger. More durable. It survived her assault and grew back fiercer than before. The anniversary of that first phone call passed quietly. I did not mark it. Did not dwell on it. Just noted the date and moved forward. Some wounds heal better in darkness. Without examination. Without ceremony. Time doing its slow work of transformation. But I remembered Edward's voice that night. The words that changed everything. Your daughter-in-law isn't real. The moment when illusion cracked. When careful deception met stubborn truth. When an old woman decided to fight instead of surrender. That moment still mattered, still echoed in quiet ways. In the community center Daniel designed. In the letters from other survivors. In the simple fact that we were both still here. Winter arrived early that year. Snow covering the balcony railing. Ice forming patterns on the windows. The clean cold that makes everything look fresh and possible. I bought a small Christmas tree. Decorated it with Harold's old ornaments. Invited Daniel for dinner on Christmas Eve. Just the two of us. Simple food. Quiet conversation. The celebration of survival. No candles on the table. I had lost my taste for that particular performance. But there was warmth. Safety. The deep contentment of people who had faced evil and lived to tell the story. Daniel brought wine. Good wine this time. His choice. His money. His celebration of freedom from manipulation. We toasted absent friends. Harold, who had missed this battle but given me the strength to fight it. Edward, who had made justice possible. Weber and Hoffman, who had turned our pain into evidence. And ourselves. Two people who had refused to be victims forever. Who had chosen to stand up. Speak out. Fight back against a predator who thought we were too old and too trusting to be dangerous. We were wrong about that last part. After Daniel left, I sat in Harold's chair. Watched snow fall past my window. Listened to the city settling into winter quiet. Isabella was somewhere in federal prison tonight. Counting days until possible freedom. Planning her next performance. Believing that charm and lies would eventually overcome bars and walls. She would be disappointed, but I would not think about her tonight. Would not give her free space in my mind. She had taken enough already. Instead, I thought about small victories. Community centers with wide doorways. Letters from grateful survivors. Sunday afternoons with tea and honest conversation. The ordinary miracles that happen when good people refuse to stay silent. When old women discover they are not as helpless as predators believe. When families learn to trust again, carefully and wisely, but trust nonetheless. The snow kept falling, clean and cold and beautiful. And in the morning there would be new light.